I want to highlight, again, some of this new terminology and kind of lay out how the new rules will take place. So again, we're going to have a valuation date, and I think all of you are used to that. So your actuary asks you for data. You send us the data kind of as of that valuation date or close to it for that next year. Now, though, again, we're going to throw in, we're going to have a measurement date. And that's, again, how we're going to deal with that off cycle. So valuations aren't required every year. They're going to be required every other year. So what do we do in that off cycle year? That's where we'll use this measurement date. And we can use the results from your valuation date or that base valuation, kind of roll them forward to a different measurement date, and then you can take those results and then use them for your reporting date. So hopefully you'll have everything ahead of time before you have to use it in your year-end statements. But remember, valuation date, measurement date, and reporting date now. The next slide just says in words what I just talked about. We'll really run all of your base numbers at that valuation date. Then you will see some roll forwards from us, which you really haven't seen under the current rules. Under the current rules, they let us just keep things static. And that was really an odd thing for we actuaries when the GASB 45 rules came out. We typically never leave things static. We were always kind of, rolling the liabilities through time. And now in the new rules, that's what we're seeing more. We really are going to do those roll forward calculations. We're not going to stay static in that off year on those liability calculations. So here was my best shot at trying to get a picture down of, and this is just an example though, of what it might look like in that 2-year cycle. So here it's probably small print on your page, but I've just tried to shorten it up, valuation date. That will line up in most of your first year cycles with your measurement date for that first time. You'll then use those results from that measurement date then for that first reporting date though, a year later at the end of that year. The next cycle, which I've labeled, measurement date 2, so that's the next year then, or the second year in your cycle. Again, we'll use those same valuation results. You can see the from the first part of that year. But now we're going to roll those forward to that second measurement date, and you'll use those in that second then reporting period. So again, that one valuation will get you the results for your 2 cycles, but we will roll those forward using those measurement dates in the off-cycle years. And again, everybody will be on that every other year cycle. And these are all pretty important, our implementation strategies as we move to these new rules. So before you get there, some important things to think about, and I work with a lot of entities that they are making some changes right now to have the changes in the liability happen, off of the balance sheet before we have to show the liabilities on the balance sheet for the first time. So there's can be a lot of good discussions about what things need to take place now, that any change in liability might be alarming, and let's get that done now while it's in the footnotes before they move to the balance sheet. So those are all things to think about now. The first one that I already noted was if you have the revocable OPEB trust now, you might want to think about making it irrevocable so that you kind of get the benefit of that going forward under the new rules. Again, some entities will decide not to. You'll have a little bit more education and hurdles to jump through, just like you do now to explain that we do have monies backing up the liabilities. GASB doesn't count them as official assets under, if they're an R trust. You'd have that same kind of education going forward, but if you're kind of tired of that, now might be a good time to switch and get the full benefit. And because the liabilities are moving to your balance sheet, you'd get the full asset offset from an irrevocable trust, and it would make that liability showing up on your balance sheet less if you can take credit of the assets. We see a lot now of kind of plan design going on with the OPEBs. And this is a similar thing that happened when you really had to record your liabilities more formally for the first time under GASB 45. People really got a feel for their liabilities, strategized as to how we're going to pay for these. Do we need to place cost controls on these benefits? Do we need to phase them out? All those things that happened with GASB 45 are kind of happening again now with GASB 75, but a little more fine tuning. Some school districts that have benefits, disclosures under 16, 27, and 45 are now trying to redesign things so that they only have one set of disclosures under OPEBs. You can do some of that plan design if possible. So, putting cost controls on those OPEB benefits is good to do now, again, before they move directly to your balance sheet and you feel any volatility there. It will be a little bit easier to see and maybe, cause more uneasiness when it's directly on your balance sheet. Now it's in the footnotes. So again, anything that you can make some of that volatility go away. I know it's easier said than done too, but any of those cost control plan design changes are really good now to think about. Going forward, it will be more important to have formal written funding policies. We brought this up too with the changes in GASB 45 to the accrual style of accounting. Public pension accounting, of course, now because they've unlinked the funding calculations from the expensing calculations, that's forced entities to come up with new funding strategies and formally then have policies behind those because of that. And the same thing will be true going forward. So I think because reviewers of your financial statements will be looking for those, what is your strategy to handle these liabilities? They're going to be looking for more funding policies on the pension side, so they'll continue to look for those on the OPEB side too, probably more so than they ever have yet. So it's more important than ever too to just have some written funding policies around how you're going to deal with these liabilities. If you adopt something, it's not set in stone. Of course, it can be changed. Your policies can change, but it's just important to have a written funding policy. It's a good time with your auditors or actuaries to kind of review all your actuarial assumptions. We've really been having a lot more discussions with our entities or bringing them up again. We always ask, for example, once you have people retire from your entity, even if you're not giving them a direct subsidized benefit, as you know in Minnesota we have that implicit benefit or the access benefit. So at retirement, how many people stay on your plan and take that access benefit versus how many drop off? So we've always asked for feedback as to how many retirees have you had stay on versus how many drop off. Some of you have been very good about providing historical data on that to get a feel. Is it 15%? Is it 65%? Is it 80%? And it does vary from one entity to the next. And it's even a better time now to really get your arms around that and tighten it up because again, as much of those things we can tighten up now and take some of that volatility out of those OPEB liabilities will be better than when it's directly on the balance sheet and the liabilities bouncing around it. You might get more questions. So really take a look at your retirement patterns, who is staying on the plans in retirement, and as you know, trends, things can change over time. So again, just because we tweak an assumption now doesn't mean in 2 years we can't slightly change it. We don't want to make big shifts, and actually most of our assumptions have been pretty good versus what we expect. The large pension systems have to do formal experience studies every other year. So they actually have to look at what's happening with retirement patterns and what's happening with turnover. So then the OPEB plan is a benefactor of that because we can look at those experience studies and get a feel for what's happening with mortality, turnover trend, and use those as your OPEB assumptions in your plan. But because it's a different benefit, because it's a medical benefit, not a pension benefit, we should also think about that, and does that cause us to change any of those assumptions? So it's a good time to review all of your assumptions, tighten those things up before you have to move this liability to the balance sheet. And if you're a smaller employer, that alternative measurement method is still available to you. That nothing changed too much there, but all of the assumptions, of course, the changes in the discount rate and the funding method though then follow along in the new rules, but they didn't take away that alternative measurement method or some of the simplifying steps that we can make for the smaller entities there. The only bad news is the smaller entities can still use that, but you have to have it done every other year instead of once every 3 years now.